Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you on. To start off with, tell me a little bit about what you do at Papercup and how the world is going to look different if your mission plays out the way you want it to.
Cool. Well, the mission will definitely play out as we want it to. So basically, video content is typically held and shackled to one language. And what that means is if you watch a YouTube video or a Netflix TV show, it's really hard to produce it in multiple languages because it's just really expensive. So what we want to do is auto-translate videos so that creators, the people that actually make these videos, can reach a far wider audience and basically milk their content. So if you create video content in English, for example, you're essentially limited to just reaching the 1 billion people that speak English. We want to open that up to the rest of the world by auto-translating content into other languages. And if and when this does crystallize, we envision a world where all of the world's videos, whether it's the archive that sits in Amazon videos or Sony and Paramount's premium content or all of Twitch's videos, can be open to any language, to any person on earth. And that way, all video content will basically be consumable by anyone.
And other than this sort of like awesome big picture vision that you've got to work towards, is there like a personal element to this business for you as well? Is there, a story or a link, some connection that you have that really binds you to this personally as well?
So for me, what was interesting is I always wanted to build something that had real utility to people, that actually made a practical difference to somebody's day-to-day life. I think the likes of Pinterest and whether it be YouTube or any consumption platform is really interesting to me. But I think what takes it a step further is where you use technology in a way that actually practically changes somebody's day-to-day life. So whether that's like TaskRabbit, where previously if you couldn't actually commission the task yourself or delegate it to somebody else, you had no option of actually grabbing groceries or delivering an object somewhere else. Whereas TaskRabbit changed that, or Uber for transportation. So too, I always thought, what could I introduce into the world that actually helped somebody in a meaningful way? And especially with these video creators, you look at the glitz and glamour of a finished product of what's actually distributed on a platform. What you don't realize is just the time, the energy, and the capital investment that goes into actually making a video. These creators really struggle. It's hard for them to make a meaningful earning just from the videos that they create. But by expanding their reach to multiple different audiences, we can change the game for them.
Well, it's definitely an exciting prospect to think that we could have, all these videos in any language and in the original creator's voice using your technology. Let's go into the product a little bit more later and some of the details around it. But for now, let's cycle back to your pre-EF experience. So you founded Deloitte startup Incubator. What was that experience like? And by doing that, did you start to get a bit of a flavor that this was something you wanted to do yourself, to found your own company?
So Deloitte's a really interesting beast. It's an 18,000 person company. It's been around for over a century. It's an incredible company. And Deloitte has probably one of the most well-respected positions with enterprise companies that have 1,000+ employees. And I teamed up with 4 other guys in Deloitte, and we realized you have a bunch of talented people within the organization, and you have a lot of corporate clients. Why don't we try and industrialize some of the ideas and proof of concepts that people were coming up with? That was the premise behind it. And that's when we basically launched what was an internal incubator, which was taking ideas and proof of concepts, putting some actual meat around it, giving them guidance and advice, and helping them actually launch a product and eventually a business off the back of just an idea or an application that they built on client side. And that was really exciting. That was the first time, one of the first times I should say, that existed in Deloitte's history. And that gave me a better idea of building and looking at ideas and concepts from inception and trying to build an actual product out of that. And that was definitely exciting.
And after Deloitte, you were at Octopus, where you also sort of launched a new venture there. Tell me a little bit about that experience. And also, I'm kind of interested to know, was this for you, did it become a series of sort of strategic experiences that were building towards you founding a company? Or was it more just, one thing came, then the other thing came, and then you realized, hey, this is my time now? Was it more emergent than deliberate, I guess?
Right. So at Deloitte, after the incubator, what I did with another fellow is we launched for the first time in Deloitte's history, their investment arm, which is investing in early stage technology startups. So I saw both sides, one which is building from scratch, which I wasn't necessarily personally doing, but really excited me. And secondly was the investment side. And I realized that I'd much rather build rather than invest. It was certainly exciting to do it in the context of Deloitte, but I realized where my passion lay and what I wanted to do. And that's why I went over to Octopus. Octopus had an incredible accelerator that they set up called Octopus Labs. They launched a peer-to-peer lending product called Octopus Choice, which grew to over 100 million in loans quite quickly. And it was just a really impressively set up incubator in the context of a corporate environment. So I was brought in to basically launch their next financial product, whatever that might be, in conjunction with some of the directors and other employees that were already in the incubator.
And how did you hear about EF, and why did you decide it was for you?
So a few months into Octopus, I realized that even though it was a really well set up incubator, I needed to just go and do something on my own, because if you do something in the context of a corporate environment, you'll still have the backing and the cushion of a company that you can't get away from. And that means that you're not going to get the same intensity and the same level of ownership. And I don't just mean equity, I mean actual just ownership of the company, where you feel that sense of pride and practical level of achievement. You can only get that if you just go and launch something on your own. So I had to convince my wife over a bit of time, but we eventually got there, and I started working on my own side projects while at Octopus, which they encourage because it also stimulates creativity and just getting your own sense of exposure. And I started working on my own product, which was like a recruitment platform, which was horrible, but at least I was trying something. Ended up going to an EF event just spontaneously. Walked up to one of the people that were there and just explained what I was doing, and they said, "You should apply." I said, "Why would I apply right now? I don't have anything, nor am I a programmer, for example." But they really encouraged me, which I was happy they did, and that was the starting point.
And what's your kind of dominant memory of the very early stages? So kickoff weekend, you're getting thrown into a room of 100 super smart, super ambitious people who all want to build a globally important tech company. What did that feel like?
So it's interesting. So I actually, I had this predefined vision in my mind of what EF was, which was just purely technical people who, with more academic backgrounds, who might be disconnected from what it's like to actually build a company. But I was actually wrong. I mean, EF has done a good job of educating people of how it actually all works and what the EF as a whole can actually do for you if you have an idea or if you have this contrarian insight of something big to build. So just meeting the people week one was kind of shocking for me, because you realized not only were people incredibly bright, but they also had outsized ambitions to create something really big. And that kind of just forces you to think in a different way.
How many co-founders did you have to go through before you got to Jamon, your final co-founder who's helping you build Papercup?
Yeah, I don't disclose my personal relationships.
Don't kiss and tell.
So it was funny, before the program, EF does a good job of showing you just this catalog of other people that are on the program. And I came up with my Trello board. I prioritized who I thought I'd meet. And what's funny is you really have no idea. You don't know who you want to found a company with. You might have an idea, but you're likely to actually be wrong about that, because you look for social cues instead of looking at who you could actually be most productive with, which is actually one of the biggest questions you have to ask. So I met with a bunch of different people before the program actually started, and then I launched with one fellow. We worked on the recruitment idea and quickly came to the conclusion that there actually wasn't a big enough market for us to actually tackle. And immediately after that, the day after we split, so the second person I teamed up with was Jamon.
And what did the earliest stages of talking about the product, trying to sort of think about a prototype, look like? Because obviously what you're building is very complex and requires sort of a lot of engineering on the back end. So how did the idea sort of develop, and what did the early customer development conversations look like?
I think a big part of it was and everybody likes telling their own story and dreaming up what their own product is, and then just trying to actually put that into practice. But what we realized is we have no idea what the hell video creators want. So our one task, we basically had two tasks. Jamon had to prove that he could actually convert what he knew theoretically into an actual product. And I had to go out there and just find out who cared about this. What do they want? What's important to them? Do they want their videos translated? And equally, is there an audience for it? Do people want to watch translated videos? And that's what I just spent a lot of my time doing. And in fact, we weren't convinced that video was the right market to begin with, because there's a lot of audio-based content out there, whether it's audiobooks, podcasts, learning material, whatever it might be. So I think just going out there and it's hard to do this, intentionally trying to prove yourself wrong with certain hypotheses that you have. That's what led us to where we are now.
And what, if anything, surprised you about those conversations? Were there things that you learned about video creators that you weren't expecting at all? And, was the most surprising thing the thing that led to your insight of what you actually wanted to do?
So even if you're aware of confirmation bias, that you're looking for things you're looking for things that people will just reaffirm what you believe. Even if you're aware of that, which I really was conscious of it, it's super hard to fight it off, because you want to orient the conversation in such a way that the outcome is, Jesse, you're absolutely right. You are heading down the right path. But it's working to your disadvantage if you do that. So I think fighting that off was surprisingly hard.
In the run-up to demo day, I remember the sort of talk around the EF team. They were confident that you were going to be one of the good pitchers and that you kind of had things handled. How did it feel on the day, though, when you were backstage? Did you feel like you had everything handled and that it was all going to go smoothly?
I think there are two things. One is, even for those sort of presentations, people like to just tag it as a natural skill. It's totally not. I spent a lot of time practicing in my Deloitte and Octopus days on how to present, how to articulate, who to look at, how to move, what hand gestures should look like, walking with purpose. All of those things are actually learned. So people shouldn't fear. You can convert yourself into a speaker if you want to. Second of all, even though I went through all that training, you're bugging out when you're on stage. You're thinking, even though you've rehearsed your lines 467 times, when you walk on stage, you're just in this different mindset. And it hits you like this hard crashing wave. But equally, there's a counterforce, which is the adrenaline, and that kicks in. And all of a sudden, when you get into motion, you're just in the flow, and it just works.
And you were opening the show as well, just to clarify for listeners as well, which is no mean feat. How did the conversations go after that then? So obviously the second part of demo day is people start coming to your stall and having a chat with you. Were you pleased with the initial kind of response, the initial conversations that you were having at that, the first stage of revealing your company to the world?
Yeah, the conversations were great. People first are incredulous. They don't think you actually have something, which is exciting when you actually do. And it's not just air and vaporware in the background. So I think that's one exciting thing. Two, what you realize is that people typically migrate to the same set of questions. And that actually is really helpful, because it tells you what you should be preparing for investor conversations and also for customers and partners. Rafi, who's from Genie AI, came up with something really powerful. He said, just when questions stop correlating with each other, that's when you know you've just maximized all of the preparation that you can do. You're in a good position. So just figure out where the commonality is between the questions that people are asking, and then you'll cover the biggest risk areas that people have in their mind.
And in the weeks following up from demo day, so the last few weeks now, you've been going through all of these investor meetings. It's your first time raising a round. What's that experience been like? How have you navigated it?
How have I navigated it? I wish there was. Well, I want to say there's a secret sauce. There totally isn't. But there are some really interesting frameworks that you should use for just navigating investment. One is making sure that you parallel all conversations, that they actually happen simultaneously. One thing that I just didn't do really well was making sure that when you speak with one investor and you're in mature conversations, that you're at an equal stage with others. The problem is, if you're in the privileged position of somebody offering to participate in your round, you then have this time lag of where the investors are that you actually want to target. So I think that's one thing that's really important to navigate. Two, what I think is really probably one of the most important things is, people have genuine questions and concerns about your business, but they want to find an opportunity to invest in. So it's not your job to get aggressive and to just counter every single point that they make. Digest what they're saying, figure out what the root of the concern is, and try and address that as best as you can. So I think taking a more amicable approach to it is actually really helpful. Otherwise, you're more inclined to just immediately deny something that they put down on the table, but usually there's something in there that you actually should be listening to and responding to.
Dev, in one of the previous episodes of the podcast, sort of provided quite an interesting frame on the process of founders going to investors. which is basically that valuable companies are a scarce resource. So it's not just about the investor choosing you in some senses. If you have a valuable company and something that you believe in, and something that you've proven that you're getting initial traction for, you also have the ability to sort of, to an extent, go to investors. How have you been thinking about choosing your investors? Obviously, not every startup is in the privileged position to do that. But what sort of qualities have you been looking for in the people that you want to take money from?
I think that's definitely a privileged position to be in, but I think anybody can ask themselves the question, which you should, which is, what type of investor do I want? So no matter how in demand your company is, or whether or not it's considered a really in demand deal, at the end of the day, if you pinpoint the type of investor that you want, you're more likely to actually lock down an investor, because you're more likely to fall into their criteria for an investment. So I think for us, it was who really understands media, because I realized that was one of the bigger questions, at least for me, in terms of the trajectory of the company. I'm not somebody who was deep into media at all before EF, but it's something that we obviously need to understand and really tackle. I think that was certainly one question. And two, who could help us with some of the operational questions that we have? So one of our big questions is, what's the best route to market? Do you go for a significantly discounted pricing model and then try and build up a community of creators? I don't know the right answer. I'd love to find an investor, though, who has in their portfolio examples that give me the confidence that they can actually give us good advice in this case.
So you mentioned that media is an area that you're looking to, learn a lot more about. By definition, it's going to be really important for the business. How are you going about doing that? Are you, how are you keeping abreast of things? Are you engaging in conversations? Are you putting yourself in circles where those conversations are happening? How are you thinking about that?
There are two big things that I'm doing. Any person that I think is even semi-related to media, I basically ask them, obviously get an idea of what their knowledge base is and try and really dip into that, but ask them two questions. One, what are the publications that you read that you feel are most insightful? And secondly, who's a person that you think is just super connected in the space that really understands the fundamentals that can help me? And that's helped me build up this small network that's continuing to grow of people that are just super plugged in and can actually help out. And then each of those have fed some publication that's actually really helped me just keep abreast of what's going on.
And given that you don't come from a deeply technical background, how has the process of sort of learning about the tech and working with Jamon been? How have you guys been able to meet minds almost, so you could get a clue of what he's actually building and how this actually works?
I think there was a lot of calibration in the beginning. Jamon is incredibly bright, super technical, really understands the meat of deep learning and different aspects of what we're building. But I come from a different universe, and thankfully I was always exposed to product and the technical side of things just at Deloitte and Octopus, but not to the degree that your CTO is. So in the beginning, there was a divide, and it was both of our jobs to try and bridge that. So on the one hand, Jamon had to convert some of the more technical jargon into something that was understandable, but equally I had to build up my knowledge base. So I was taking Coursera courses, I was reading some of the papers, and then just sitting down with Jamon to go through some of the concepts. So I think it's both people have to put effort into it.
Looking back now at the last few months with, a term sheet on the table, what do you sort of reflect on as being some of the most difficult moments? And do you look back and think, well, I'm glad we kind of kept going there, or I'm glad that we stuck at it as a team, rather than breaking up and found it with someone else? Was there a moment or several moments?
We never had that as a team. Thankfully, Jamon and I always just worked well together from day one, and I think we're lucky in that sense, because you couldn't have projected that. But I think what you don't realize, everybody says that founding a company and building something from scratch is incredibly hard. You don't realize how grueling sometimes it can be, because it's not just the idea of rejection. Everybody knows you get rejected, and you have to take those punches to the stomach. People will say no often, but also people will doubt you. People will be incredibly skeptical. People that aren't even looking to invest. So, and you'll also read news. You also look at what competitors are doing, all of which counters whatever your philosophy or hypothesis is. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to just stand up and pull through. But if you're not resilient, you're bound to just fall down on the wayside, because you're going to get hit by these bullets left, right, and center. And especially in the beginning, you are in this mode of survival because you're nothing. You're two people, you're a prototype. Anybody can, in theory, replicate what you're doing. So you do feel like you're in quite a precarious state. But I think having a really strong mindset and being convinced about what you're doing, so long as you're not just this insane optimist who's not pragmatic at all, it's actually really important to have that healthy dose of optimism because it really fuels you through the process. And Jaman and I made sure to do that throughout.
In terms of sort of the co-founding relationship, is that why it's important, do you find, to kind of click personally so that when the times get tough, there's an element of moral support between the two of you and you can kind of continue to survive, as you're saying?
Well, I think there are two things. One is you have to learn how to work with your co-founder. It's because it's not the traditional social relationship that you might have with a partner or a friend. And if you try and forge that archetype of a relationship, it often creates more distance. So I think what you have to do first and foremost is understand who the other person is. What do they care about? What makes them really emotional? What makes them tick? And once you do that, then you can start supporting each other. I think that's one. And two, you don't need to solely rely on the co-founder relationship. Thankfully, that should be the bedrock of course, the company and the relationship. But look elsewhere for personal mentors as well. You should still be open to that, especially people who have gone through a similar process, because they can really empathize with you. They understand where you're coming from. They know the pain points. They know the self-doubt that you might be going through. And I think that's totally acceptable.
How important have like third parties and advisors been for you on the journey so far?
Yeah, really important. I think they give you'll always hear a range of advice. People will give you totally opposing opinions, but it's your job to filter through and figure out what's actually best for the company. And they're hard decisions, don't get me wrong, but that's exactly what a founding team is supposed to do. Take all of the noise, the feedback, the advice from the market, from people that you really trust, and then try and make a decision. What people also suggest doing, which I think is true, don't try and just get this wide spectrum of opinion for every decision that you're making. Don't go to 15 people. You'll just confound the process and complicate the decision-making process. What you should do is find the one or two people that you just really trust. And if they're wrong, okay, fine. Course correct. Make sure that it's a decision that you can actually rectify. But it's okay to be wrong or be slightly misguided. But I think finding those one or two people are important.
So we've spoken about all the lessons you've learned sort of from a business sense, the fundraising process, pitching, and working with Jaman, your co-founder. But what have you most learned personally about yourself over the course of the last few months, stepping into this kind of entrepreneurial path and trying to build a company for the first time?
That you don't need to, everybody thinks that they have these certain passions in life and things that just make them incredibly happy and getting into a certain flow. For me, whether that's basketball or speaking with incredibly bright people about challenging topics, but what you realize when you found a company is a lot of what you're doing can actually be quite mundane or can feel outside of the circle of things that you actually thought, A, were in your zone of competence, but B, things that you actually liked. But just with a switch of your frame of mind, you can actually really embrace these things. So even now when we're recruiting talent. What do I know about recruiting? But I've learned about it and I've really grown to love it, where I sit down with an individual and figure out what do they care about? What are their aspirations? What do they want to get out of Papercup? What's their dream? What's their ideal role? And that's something that I never thought that I'd love and it would just be dry and boring, but I've actually grown to love it. So I think just by changing your frame of mind, you can actually embrace a lot of what you have to do as a founder.
Great. Well, Jesse, thanks so much for coming on the show. Let's end with that.
Cool. Thank you.